This podcast episode is sponsored by Geekdom, San Antonio's entrepreneurship hotspot and co-working space. Whether you need one-time recurring office space or event space, Geekdom has it all. Use code Social Butterfly when signing up for a membership to receive $25 off of monthly memberships. Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high-achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award-winning leadership and visibility coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. There is a version of business growth that almost no one prepares you for. I'm talking about the moment where you can feel very clearly that something about your business model no longer aligns or no longer fits you. And that's a much more confronting place to be in because sometimes it might be obvious. Sometimes there may be this sort of breakdown that kind of signals that something's wrong, like an obvious failure. Or there might be an external reason that justifies it's time to make a shift or a big change. And then sometimes there's just this internal awareness that keeps showing up even when you are trying to fix the problem. Usually this internal awareness shows up at the most inconvenient times, telling you that the way that you are operating and the way that your business is structured, the way your life is currently set up, isn't actually aligned with not only who you become, but where you are going. And once you feel that in your body, you can't unsee it. You can try to ignore it. You can try to outwork it, and you can try to optimize whatever already exists. But that feeling is not going to go away. It's only going to get louder until you finally get really quiet and listen. So we're going to talk about that today. In episode 38, which is the episode before this, I'll link in the show notes below, but I talked about how I'm navigating rebuilding my relationship with money after a very inconsistent season. And today, we're going to dive into that inconsistent season. We are going to go full blazing into my experience rebuilding my whole entire business model for the third time. In this episode, we are going to cover what that moment looks like when your business still looks successful on the outside, but you know internally it no longer fits, and the identity tension that it creates. We're also going to cover why high-performing women stay in misaligned business models that are no longer able for them to actually hold, and what it actually requires to rebuild at this level, shifting away from strategy to more self-trust and recalibrating how you lead and deciding whether you're willing to rebuild a business that truly matches who you become. So let's get into it. May of 2026 marks 11 years in business for me, and I just need to sit here and give gratitude for everybody who has worked with me in the last 11 years and the people that have referred me to clients who have supported me, you name it. There's so much gratitude for you, your support. And those of you who are listening right now who maybe have discovered me, I'm so thankful that you are in my orbit. But you know, May of 2026, now being 11 years, looks completely different as May of 2015 was. I originally started my company, Social Butterfly Gal, as a social media management company. And obviously it has shifted and changed. And of course, if I'm being honest, what has defined my growth over the last 11 years hasn't really been just because of the way I've scaled or my visibility or all of the accolades that I have accumulated in the 11 years. But it's been my willingness to rebuild when something no longer feels aligned. Like I said, I'm not new to this. The first 5 years of my company, I was solely a social media management strategy and consulting company. So I know what it's like to see something and recognize that it is no longer aligned And in 2021, 2022, that's when I was slowly pivoting. I took like a whole entire year to sunset my social media management clients, full on, just go into consulting and then started building the coaching business while simultaneously buying out my business partner to gain 100% ownership of the conference. And that's what my business model has been so far. It's been this hybrid of the coaching and the conference. So since August of 2025, I've actually been rebuilding my entire business model, like I said, for the third time. And I have sort of done this privately and also publicly at the time. I made a decision first of kind of deciding what was going to stay private because I do believe that while I was going through a lot of the grief and the turmoil that I was experiencing, the burnout that I was experiencing last year, I really needed to do that privately and just kind of stay close to home when it came to all of the emotions that I was feeling. I'm somebody who, I've said this time and time again, I'm somebody who believes that if you are going to share something that's very vulnerable and personal and come with that transparency, you do so when it becomes more of a scar than the wound. Like, I'm never going to share something in the middle of the heaviness. I'm always going to kind of just let it sit and relax before I can share from the power. And so I was building sort of privately, but then also I made the commitment to sort of share publicly at a very high level, granular way where you kind of know something was going on, but you kind of didn't know all the things, right? So a little private and public, but I really kind of just want to talk about how I came to this decision of rebuilding and how awareness really was the catalyst to all of this. So, a year ago at this time, May of 2025, I had this big epiphany moment, very awareness moment that my business model, the hybrid version of the conference and the coaching, was no longer sustainable for me. And I feel like from the outside, you probably wouldn't be able to make sense of it because, again, social media is such a fucking big lie at times. You could see something on social media and a lot of people were like, oh, you're killing it. You're doing all these things. Like, this is amazing. But like internally, I knew the numbers, I knew the data, I knew all of the more logical things that this just wasn't in alignment with where I was going. So on social media and everything that you were seeing, this hybrid model looked like a very high revenue model. But one of the things that I was recognizing was I kept trying to make the conference be that lead gen force to funnel clients into my coaching business because that's what normally happens. If you have a founder who makes a decision to host an event, there's always got to be a connector to what's the next logical step for the people that come to this event to then funnel into whatever programs or courses or trainings or coaching that you really kind of want to lead them into. And for a lot of founders of these really high level one-on-one coaching businesses, they often use the conference or the event as the big volume lead gen force. But what I recognized was that actually was not in alignment with my birth chart or my human design, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I think I was just recognizing that I needed to position the conference as that lead generator that will funnel people into my coaching. And that's what I felt I was being called to do. So in 2023, I really took a hard look and said, all right, we are going to build the conference. We're going to start growing it. We're going to take it from this place that I had been always hosting the conference, and we're going to take it to the 24th floor of this big, powerful bank that only the who's who of my city goes to. And so I was really kind of just like putting all of my energy into building that out while also pouring into my clients and pouring into the launch mode of gaining new clients and when I was in a sales cycle. And I think one of the biggest things that I recognized was these two business models, even though they were hybrid and I was trying to merge them, they had two different audience sets. When I had launched the conference with my then business partner, in 2018, the audience at the time for the conference was focused on more beginner startup founders. And while I was separately building my coaching business after the social media management company, I was recognizing that the coaching clients that were paying me for one-on-one coaching were paying me close to 4 to 5 figure investments. And that should have told me right then and there that my ideal client profile was completely out of alignment, but I didn't listen. I was like, you know what? I can maneuver and make it be to where all of the audiences are going to fit. But not only just on the audience side, but the two business models had very two different demands. So coaching, especially if you're doing high proximity one-on-one coaching, it's really built off of a relationship one-on-one model. So we're not looking for high volume. We're really looking for tangible relationships because of the fact that there has to be a building of the know, like, trust factor in order to make those big 4 or 5 figure investments. And we're talking about, like, $24,000 a year for one full year of private one-on-one coaching. And the conference, if you will, was a lot of energy. It demanded so much of me. So when I was working with coaching clients in my containers, obviously specific clients had coaching terms. So maybe it was like a 6 month term or a 12-month term. But the conference was demanding almost 11 to 10 months of my time. So once one conference year would end, which we would have the conference in June, I would take maybe about a month and a half off and then immediately get started with venue sourcing in August of the next year. And I was just constantly trying to always, take a break, try to get the coaching clients, pour into the coaching clients, then kind of take a look and start building out the budgets and start building out how much we would need to fundraise and looking at all these different venues and then kind of going from there between speakers and the timeline of launch and you name it. So there was just too much going on at the same time. Now, of course, I think one of the biggest things that I have to acknowledge was the conference was all me. I did outsource to an event team that worked with me. They would handle more of the day to day, like more of the day of logistics. So I was still doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it came to the actual conference planning. But at the same time, I did have an assistant working with me. And then I had a couple of interns also helping me. So while there was sort of a team, I still was doing a lot of the day to day stuff by myself on top of pouring into my coaching clients. So it was just so much of a demand. And I do believe too that not only a demand from the energy, but when we talk about having an event or conferences, sponsorship is something that is really important to the budget. And one of the things that took a great deal of my time was going out and making these relationships with the different organizations and the different people that could potentially sponsor the conference. And again, going back to the audience sets, it's a completely different client. It's a completely different audience set. With sponsors, a lot of them are corporate organizations, but there was a lot of times where building relationships with these corporate entities, you would have to really get to know that person. And then sometimes members of their team would leave the company. So then you would have to build a new relationship with somebody on their team. So you would have to restart the relationship. And then there was also not a guarantee of the ROI that was going to come out from it, but also not even a guarantee that that same corporate organization would come in at the same sponsorship level as they were the year prior. So there was just so much going on, right? When I think about the conference in itself, there was the development of the program and the speakers, the ticket sales, and it was just, again, so much. There's so many things that I can really teach on about events. I'm totally going to write that in my book one day. But I think one of the things that I really came to know about what I was building on the conference end plus the coaching end was a lot of it didn't even align with my coaching. And that was the end goal, right? Having this event leading into clients for the coaching. And yet the goal was never fully accomplished. These two business models had different rhythms to them that didn't actually support each other in the way that I really needed them to do. And when you were to ask me in full honesty about what my favorite parts about the conference were, all I could say was when I'm on stage and when I'm coaching. And I would say that I actually felt in 2025, as horrible as that year was, there we had a VIP lunch, and that was the closest I ever got to fulfilling that fulfillment of the coaching, because I had a VIP where I was coaching the women who had paid for their ticket. And so that kind of like was a light bulb moment for me that really, I just really want to be on stage and speak and train and coach. It was crystal clear that the event wasn't bringing me high level private one on one coaching clients that could spend $24,000 a year of value in working with me one on one in coaching. So then it was that moment of, okay, why in the fuck am I doing this? I had so much turmoil happen to me in 2025, specifically May of 2025. And I was spending so much money on conference expenses, making it go big or go home. And a lot of it was so tied to validation. And yet I was so burned out. I was so burned out. And in 2025, obviously, we know that there was a circumstance that was beyond my control, beyond all of our control, which was the elimination of funding for initiatives that prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion. And right before the 2024 presidential election, I had made the decision to go all in on the conference and take a step back from my coaching, because I felt that I could go farther with focusing on sponsorships, even though the data that I had, all of my P&Ls, all of the spreadsheets, the data that I had was telling me that if I just put a little bit more effort into believing in my coaching and believing in my high level pricing, I could have incredible revenue, a lean expense business model, and profit, like beautiful profit, because I wasn't going to be worried about all the conference expenses that I had. I could just focus on what actually was able to sustain my business in that coaching model. And boy, whew, was it a huge lesson for me. Over time, I could feel that even though the conference was fun, and every time that we were actually at the conference, I would get so many compliments about how this was needed and they're so thankful for it. Even though there was sort of that validation of like, thank you so much for this, it was costing me way more than just financially, but more in my energy, my capacity, and how I was showing up on a day to day basis. Because day to day, I was not feeling successful. In fact, in May of 2025, I was constantly crying, having many anxiety attacks. I was feeling so much pressure because I made the decision to have this event at a hotel, at which when I signed the contract, I was like, oh yeah, we're going to have enough money to like host this thing. And then things just started like not getting to where they needed to be, that I felt so much pressure to be able to like afford it. I felt like I was constantly trying to make numbers work that didn't want to work in the way that I needed them to. I was moving money around to make sure that the people I had committed to paying got their funds. It felt like I was managing something that was super responsible for, and I was quietly hating everything that I had built. I remember one night, almost maybe about like 2 weeks before the 2025 conference, where I had this realization. And it was this: I don't want to do this anymore. It wasn't my business that I didn't want to do. It was this version of the business model that I had for the last 3 years. And I think the hardest part wasn't realizing that, but I think it was admitting out loud what that fully meant. Because once you admit something that no longer fits, you don't get to go back from it. You don't get to pretend that it's all fine and dandy. You have to tell yourself the truth. And then you have to make a decision of how you're going to move forward once you figure out the truth. And I knew that if I didn't want to do this anymore, then that meant that I had to let go of something that people always associated me with. Something that, if I'm being honest, was super tied to my identity. I think the conference wasn't just an offer that I had, but the conference felt like my recognition. It felt like something people could point to and say, oh, this is what Christina does, especially for the audience and the community that I serve. Letting it go didn't just feel like a business decision. It felt like risking how I was seen entirely in my whole entire business model. So I made the decision to stay committed to the end because, well, we had to get through it. We had contracts that we had signed. There was no way to get our money back. If we were to cancel, that just would have been even worse. So we pulled it together. Thankfully, my audience that was there just really held me close and allowed me to be super vulnerable on the day of. And the thing is that I had this data. I could see over the last 2.5 years how big of an expense sucker this was and how more aligned coaching was on my nervous system, but also in the way that I built. I could feel it in my body, and the stress was manifesting in my face with so much acne. I had just learned about my fibroids, and I could sense that my body was so tense, even though I was doing all that I could to make sure that I was working out daily and prioritizing fueling my body and trying not to be so stressed. But that's what it looks like at this level. It's continuing something that technically works while knowing that it no longer fits. And when I finally allowed myself to stop trying to make it work and instead started to make decisions from what I knew to be true, everything didn't suddenly expand. It actually got quieter. One of the best things that I could have done for myself was right after the conference, I made the decision to take a mid-year break. I prioritize rest and fun and just trying to listen to myself before I made the decision to start moving and shifting my business model. And that's where, for me, I really dove into my birth chart and my human design profile because that both of those things really became central to how I was going to rebuild because that is my actual design. That is the living, breathing document of the way I make money, my gifts, my talents, you name it, and what I was going to do to actually pour into all of the ways of making a more successful business model that prioritized high level one on one coaching with private coaching being the forefront, front door offer, and VIP days being that secondary offer, and speaking to support it. And I do feel like since August of 2025, a lot of things have shifted. Some of it has been a little loud, some of it has been more quieter. But one of the things that has shifted for me is the way I make decisions is much more different now than when I did back in May of 2025. I don't second guess myself in the same way that I used to. The conversations that I'm having with high level founders who have invested close to, that 5-figure investment are just phenomenal. The amount of coaching clients that I've been able to work with since August of 2025 has been top tier, and the results have been incredible. But I do feel like the work is just more deeper. I feel it in the way that I'm being positioned and my messaging and just the results that I'm having, to where I finally know how to articulate what I do, who I'm for, how I help my clients, and the actual program promise that occurs when you work with me in one-on-one coaching. And for the very first time, probably in my business history, it's so beautiful to see. And it's so incredible to know that I could articulate that way more effective than me as the conference founder could ever have. So I do feel like the way that I've recalibrated how I lead has been so significant to the way that I'm rebuilding. And I do feel like it's important to say that while there has been so much great results, like messaging and positioning and clients and just like incredible things that have allowed me to see this is where I'm meant to be, there's also gaps that I'm still closing. When you make significant changes in your business and your business model, we automatically think that the second that you make the change, you're going to see the results like that. And it doesn't happen like that. And I think that's where most of my clients do struggle with, because they automatically think, because we live in that instant gratification world, they automatically think that once you make some change, you're going to see the result right then and there. And it's going to take time. And you're going to have to be in the uncomfortable as it's taking time. So for me, the two gaps that I'm still working on is cash flow stability and consistency with staying in this model, and not going back to the old or trying to shift it even when I see it's quiet or it's slow or it's not working. Fully believing in this is what I'm meant to be doing without trying to see the proof and the validation from external factors. I think that's where understanding how to trust myself has been just something that I've needed to really do and prove. But I think it's really important that you need to know that you don't need to maintain something that's misaligned just because it once worked. And you don't need constant momentum to feel secure in where you're going. Like I said, I've seen this exact pattern with my clients. These are women that I'm coaching that have generated incredible revenue and have created so much impact. And when they are in a recalibration phase as well, they're wanting that fast, give me the results. When in reality, it's so uncomfortable to be in the middle of this rebuild, and you're kind of just searching for an answer. And immediately they think oh my God, I need to tweak this. I need to refine this. And they start looking for ways to make it feel better without actually asking the harder question, is why am I still trying to make this work? Where can I slow down? Where can I really listen? What's the data telling me? What's my intuition telling me? What's my gut telling me? And I think that's one of the things too that is so incredible about me as a coach is I know that feeling. I understand what that's like. I've been there. I have rebuilt 3 times and currently still in that middle of the rebuild and being in that uncomfortable vibe. So if you are in the same space, if you are navigating this and you kind of just resonate with this, I want you to sit with me for a minute while we do a little mini coaching session. I want you to think about your business as it exists right now, the way you are operating and the way it operates, what it actually requires from you. And I want you to ask yourself very honestly, if nothing changes about this business model, if it stayed exactly like this for the next 6 to 12 months, would I actually want that? And if your answer is anything other than a clear yes, pause with me. Don't rush past that. And then want you to ask yourself, what about this business model that no longer fits me? I don't want you to answer that at the level of the offers or the tasks or the pricing, but I want you to look at it from the level of identity, who you are now versus who this business requires you to be. Where is that gap? And then underneath it, I want you to ask yourself, what are you getting by staying the same? Because you are getting something, even if it doesn't feel good. And then lastly, ask yourself if you trusted yourself fully, your decision making, your ability to rebuild, your ability to create something that actually fits the life that you are being called to live, would you stop this business model immediately? So if you're listening to this and something in your business feels off, or your identity, if it still works, I want you to sit with this. Where are you continuing something that you already know you have outgrown? What are you afraid will happen if you actually let it go? Because that's the real work. If you're in that space right now, that's exactly the work that I do inside of my private coaching, helping you see clearly, make decisions, and build something that actually holds you at the level that you are operating. If you're ready for that high level work, you can apply to work one-on-one with me in private coaching. It is a year-long commitment. The application link is in the show notes below, or you could reach out directly to get any of your questions answered. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review, because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who might be in a season of rebuild. And DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest reframe or your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and your visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers in the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I will personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all of the shares and reviews. Remember this, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.